You just walked into a room and forgot why you came. It happens in less than a second. One moment you had a clear purpose. The next, it is gone completely. You stand there looking around the room, hoping something will jog it loose. Sometimes it does. Most of the time, it doesn't. You probably blame distraction, or age, or the fact that you were thinking about something else on the way. Your brain did that on purpose. Not by accident, not because of a flaw. Deliberately, as part of a system that has been running inside your head every single moment of your life. The instant you walked through that doorway, your brain made a decision. It decided that whatever you were holding in your mind belonged to the room you just left, not this one, and it filed it away without asking you. This happens to almost every adult, multiple times a day. You walk through approximately 27 doorways every single day, and each one of them is doing something to your memory that almost nobody realizes. This is not a failure. This is not aging. This is not distraction. This is one of the most deliberate things your brain does. And understanding why it happens changes how you think about memory, about identity, and about what your mind is actually built to do. In 2011, a psychologist named Gabriel Radvansky at the University of Notre Dame decided to put this experience under a microscope. He designed a careful experiment. Participants moved through a virtual environment on a computer screen, picking up objects and placing them inside boxes they carried with them. Then they had to move to a different location. Some of them traveled the same physical distance by crossing a large open room. Others walked the exact same distance but passed through a doorway into a new space. Then Radvansky tested both groups on what they could recall. The people who had walked through a doorway forgot significantly more than the people who had covered the same ground without one. The distance was identical, the time was identical, the objects were identical. The only difference between the two groups was a doorway. He ran the experiment again. This time in the physical world, with real rooms, real furniture, real people picking up real objects and walking through actual doors. The result was the same. But what nobody expected was what happened when he ran the third version of the experiment. This time, participants didn't move at all. They simply imagined walking through a doorway. They sat completely still, closed their eyes, and pictured themselves passing from one room into another. They still forgot more than people who imagined traveling the same distance through open space. A doorway you cannot see, in a room that doesn't exist, in a scenario conducted entirely inside your own mind, still triggered the forgetting effect. That was the moment Radvansky understood that this had nothing to do with the physical door. It was about what a doorway signals to the brain. To understand why, you need to know something about how memory actually works at the level of experience. Your brain does not store your life as a single continuous stream. It doesn't record your day like a video file that plays from one end to the other. It breaks everything into chunks, separate episodes, each one tagged with context, where you were, who was there, what you were trying to do. Psychologists call these event boundaries. Your brain is constantly scanning for signals that one situation has ended and a new one is beginning. A change in your environment, a shift in your goal, a change in the people around you. A doorway is one of the strongest event boundary signals the human brain recognizes. The moment you cross one, your brain opens a new file. It begins logging a new episode, and the information you were holding in working memory gets attached to the old file, the one that belongs to the room you were just in. To retrieve that information, you often have to go back to where you started, which is exactly why returning to the original room sometimes brings the memory back in an instant. You weren't suddenly remembering. You were re-entering the context where the memory was stored. But what nobody expected was how deep this system actually goes. Think about what happens when you try to remember something and it simply isn't there. You know that you knew it. You can feel the shape of the thought without being able to reach the thought itself. That experience has a name. Psychologists call it the tip-of-the-tongue state, and it happens most often precisely when the context you learned something in no longer matches the context you are trying to remember it in. You are not forgetting. You are accessing a file from the wrong location. The information is still in there. The problem is that the filing system used the room as part of the address. In 1975, two psychologists named Duncan Godden and Alan Baddeley ran an experiment with scuba divers. They gave two groups of divers a list of 40 words to memorize. The first group learned the words sitting on a beach. The second group memorized them underwater, at a depth of 20 feet. Then they tested recall in both environments. The divers who had learned the words underwater remembered them significantly better when tested underwater. The divers who had learned on land remembered better when tested on land. When the environment changed between learning and testing, recall dropped by nearly 40%. The memory wasn't free-floating. It was anchored to the physical context where it had been formed. Your brain doesn't just store what you experienced. It stores where you were, what the light looked like, what the air smelled like, what sounds were in the background. The content and the context are encoded together. When the context disappears, when you walk out of the room, when the environment changes around you, the thread back to the memory gets harder to find. A doorway removes that context in a fraction of a second. But what nobody expected was that this system was never designed to be a problem. It was designed to be a solution. Your working memory can hold roughly 7 pieces of information at any given moment. Some researchers say it is closer to 4. This is not a limitation you should try to overcome. It is a deliberate architectural choice. Your brain is processing an extraordinary volume of input every second of your life. Visual data, sound, temperature, balance, body position, social information, emotional signals, internal state. If your brain tried to carry everything across every transition, it would spend its entire capacity managing the past instead of responding to the present. So it made a trade. It decided that most of what you were thinking about in the last room is probably irrelevant to what you need to do in this one. It cleared the cache. It reset, so you could walk into a new situation with full capacity rather than dragging the weight of the previous one behind you. That system works beautifully for almost everything your brain needs to do: navigation, task switching, managing complex social interactions, moving through a building and adapting to each space as you enter it. The cost is that sometimes you forget why you walked into the kitchen. Every brain on Earth makes that trade. You never had a choice. And here is what makes this even stranger. The effect is not limited to physical spaces. Researchers discovered that it applies to mental context as well. When you shift from one task to a completely different one, when you stop thinking about a problem and move on to something unrelated, your brain applies a version of the same boundary. The thoughts you were holding in the first task become harder to retrieve after the switch. This is why returning to an interrupted task feels disorienting. You are not picking up where you left off. You are re-entering a context your brain already partially filed away. Every time you switch tabs, change conversations, or move from one subject to another, a quiet version of the doorway effect is running in the background. You are walking through invisible doors all day long. But what nobody expected was the final layer of this, the one that makes the whole thing feel genuinely unsettling. Radvansky ran one more version of the study. He wanted to know whether you could fight back against the effect, whether knowing about it would protect you. He told participants explicitly, before they moved, that there was a doorway ahead and that they should actively hold onto their information as they crossed it. They knew they were warned, they were consciously trying. The forgetting happened anyway. Deliberate awareness of the doorway effect provides almost no protection against it. You cannot concentrate your way out of it. You cannot simply decide to remember. The filing system runs below the level of conscious thought, and it operates whether you consent to it or not. Here is the piece of this that I cannot stop thinking about. Researchers studying sleep architecture recently found that the brain uses the exact same event boundary system while you sleep. During sleep, your brain replays the events of the day. It processes them, organizes them, and decides what moves into long-term memory and what gets erased. And it does this in episodes, the same chunked, context-tagged structure it uses when you walk through rooms. The doorway effect is not a quirk. It is not a specific bug in one system. It is the core architecture of how your mind builds the story of your own life. Every environment you leave behind is a signal to your brain that one chapter is closing and another is beginning. Every transition you move through is a boundary between one version of your experience and the next. Your autobiography is made of these boundaries, which means that in a very real sense, the person you are right now is partly the product of every single doorway you have ever walked through. Your brain didn't fail you in that kitchen. It was running exactly as designed. But there is something quietly strange about the fact that a frame in a wall, a few feet of open space, can reach inside your mind and rearrange it, silently, without asking, and you cannot stop it even when you know it is coming. That's the human glitch. I want to know, what is the thing you forget most often when you walk into a room? Is there a specific doorway in your life that always blanks your mind? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think differently about how your memory works, share it with someone who blames themselves every time they forget why they walked into the kitchen. Because now you both know it wasn't their fault.